I'm Brooke, 28 years old, and here I stand in the pouring rain, mascara streaming down my face, my $300 dress clinging to my skin like a second layer of regret. My husband Ethan drove away 20 minutes ago, leaving me stranded to think about my priorities. Just as despair was setting in, headlights cut through the downpour. A black SUV pulled up, and out stepped a familiar figure, my company's security consultant, Marcus. My husband wanted to teach me a lesson, but he never expected my bodyguard to arrive. Before I tell you how I ended up drenched and abandoned on our anniversary, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of strength after betrayal. I built my career from nothing. Growing up in a small Midwest town with parents who believed a woman's highest achievement was finding a good husband, I defied expectations by moving to Chicago after college and climbing the corporate ladder. By 27, I was the youngest marketing executive at Pinnacle Innovations. Managing campaigns for Fortune 500 companies, I had my own apartment downtown, a circle of ambitious friends, and the independence I'd always craved. Then I met Ethan at an industry conference in New York. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with confident blue eyes and an aristocratic jawline, he commanded attention in every room. As CEO of a successful tech investment firm, Ethan had the kind of wealth and influence that opened any door. When he approached me after my presentation on digital marketing strategies, I was flattered by his interest. "Your insights on consumer behavior were impressive," he said, handing me his business card with his personal number written on the back. "I'd love to continue this conversation over dinner." That dinner turned into a weekend of exploring New York, Ethan showing me exclusive restaurants and private clubs I'd only read about in magazines. His attention was intoxicating. He listened to my opinions, asked about my goals, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts. When a waiter spilled wine on my dress at an upscale restaurant, Ethan had a new designer dress delivered to our table within an hour. Back in Chicago, Ethan pursued me relentlessly, sending flowers to my office daily, flying in for weekend dates, and whisking me away to Paris for my birthday after just 2 months of dating. My friends were impressed but cautious. "It feels like a fairy tale," I told my best friend Caitlin over coffee one Sunday. "He's everything I could want in a partner." Caitlin stirred her latte thoughtfully. "It's all happening so fast, Brooke. Does he always need to know where you are and who you're with? You've canceled on me 3 times because of his surprise visits." I brushed off her concerns. "He's just enthusiastic about our relationship. You know how busy he is. He fits me into his schedule whenever he can." Looking back, I should have recognized the red flags. Ethan would check my phone while I was in the shower, claiming he was just looking for a good photo of us. He criticized my wardrobe subtly. "That dress is a little revealing for a business dinner, don't you think? Or you're too beautiful to wear something so unflattering." When male colleagues texted about work, he'd look over my shoulder and ask pointed questions about my relationships with them. 6 months into our relationship, Ethan suggested I move into his luxury penthouse apartment. "Why waste money on rent when we're together every night anyway?" he reasoned. It made financial sense, so I gave up my apartment, my first taste of true independence, and relocated my life into his space. The changes were gradual but persistent. Sunday brunches with Caitlin became less frequent because Ethan planned surprise day trips. My monthly dinner with college friends was interrupted by Ethan's unexpected arrival, his cold politeness making everyone uncomfortable until the tradition eventually died. My parents, initially dazzled by Ethan's charm and success, began expressing concern about how rarely they heard from me. "You haven't called in 3 weeks," my mother said during one of our increasingly brief conversations. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" "Really happy, of course, Mom," I answered automatically, ignoring the knot in my stomach. "We're just busy with work and life. Everything's perfect." The first time Ethan taught me a lesson was 7 months into our relationship. I was 20 minutes late meeting him for dinner because a client meeting ran long. Instead of understanding, he left the restaurant before I arrived, turned off his phone, and didn't come home until the next morning. When I expressed how worried and hurt I was, he responded calmly, "I needed you to understand how it feels to be disrespected. When you prioritize work over our relationship, there are consequences." I apologized profusely, promising to manage my time better. The incident seemed reasonable enough in isolation. I had kept him waiting after all. I didn't recognize it as the first step in a pattern of control disguised as teaching moment. Despite these incidents, when Ethan proposed 8 months into our relationship during a helicopter tour over Chicago, a custom-designed diamond ring in hand, I said yes without hesitation. The proposal was filmed by a professional videographer Ethan had hired. The footage later edited into a perfect social media announcement that garnered thousands of likes and hundreds of congratulatory comments. That night, as we celebrated with champagne in our penthouse, a small voice questioned whether I was making the right decision. I silenced it with another sip of champagne and the reassurance that no relationship was perfect. Ethan loved me enough to want forever. Wasn't that what everyone wanted? Our wedding was a lavish affair at the Peninsula Hotel, with 300 guests, most of whom were Ethan's business associates and social connections. My small-town family seemed out of place amid the wealth and sophistication. Ethan had opinions on every detail, from my dress he preferred classic over the modern style I wanted to the menu selected to impress his investors rather than reflect our personal tastes. "This is as much a business opportunity as a celebration," he explained when I suggested a smaller, more intimate ceremony. "These connections will benefit both our futures." During our reception, I overheard him introducing me to a potential investor. "My wife has quite a successful little career in marketing. I'll be guiding her toward more strategic opportunities soon." The diminishment of my achievements stung, but I smiled politely. Playing my part in his performance, our honeymoon in the Maldives revealed new aspects of Ethan's personality. When I refused to go skinny dipping at our private villa because staff might see us, he went alone and didn't return for hours. I spent our first night as a married couple alone, calling his cell repeatedly while scenarios of him drowning played in my mind. He returned at dawn, unapologetic. "You chose to stay behind, so I enjoyed myself without you. Marriage doesn't mean we do everything together." This tone implied I had failed some test of spontaneity and adventure. Back home, Ethan suggested combining our finances to simplify our lives. He established joint accounts that he monitored daily, questioning purchases I made that exceeded $100. Meanwhile, he bought a new sports car without discussion, as the primary breadwinner. "I have to make executive decisions," he explained when I expressed frustration about the double standard. "When your income matches mine, you'll have equal say." This attitude extended to our social lives. Ethan found reasons to dislike most of my friends. Caitlin was too negative, my college roommate Rachel was clearly jealous of our relationship, and my work friend Jason obviously had ulterior motives for wanting to maintain our friendship. My world shrank as Ethan's expanded. He traveled frequently for business while I maintained our home and social calendar, always available when he decided to return. If I made plans without him and he came home unexpectedly, his disappointment manifested as cold withdrawal until I apologized for not anticipating his needs. The dynamic with Ethan's family complicated matters further. His mother, Caroline, a former beauty queen who had married into wealth, scrutinized everything from my table manners to my career ambitions. "Darling, you work such long hours," she commented during a family dinner 6 months into our marriage. "Ethan needs a wife who's present, not distracted by deadlines. There's nothing wrong with scaling back your career now that you're settled." Ethan's father, Richard, treated me with polite indifference, speaking primarily to his son about investments and business opportunities while I sat silently beside them. The few times I contributed to these discussions, Richard would glance at Ethan as if seeking permission to acknowledge my input. Meanwhile, my career was thriving despite the constraints of my marriage. I secured a major client that doubled my department's revenue, earning praise from company leadership and increasing whispers about a potential promotion. Ethan's reaction to my success was tepid at best. "That's nice, sweetheart," he said without looking up from his laptop when I shared the news. "Just don't let them take advantage of you. These corporations will drain you dry if you let them." His punishments for perceived transgressions became more frequent. If I didn't answer his calls immediately, he would give me the silent treatment for hours. If dinner wasn't to his liking, he would leave the table and work in his office until bedtime. Each incident was followed by a calm explanation of how I had failed and needed to improve. The most public incident occurred at his company's annual gala. I was engaged in conversation with James, the CMO of a potential client company, discussing marketing strategies that might benefit both our firms. Ethan approached after 20 minutes, placing a possessive hand on my lower back. "I'm sure my wife has taken enough of your time," he told James with a tight smile. "She tends to get carried away talking shop." Later, when I explained the business opportunity I'd been cultivating, Ethan drove home without me, leaving me to find my own transportation at midnight in an unfamiliar part of the city. When I finally arrived home via rideshare, he was calmly reading in bed. "Next time you'll remember who you attended the event with," he said without looking up from his book. "I won't compete for my wife's attention." By our first anniversary, I had developed an internal radar for Ethan's mood. I could detect the slightest shift in his tone that signaled disapproval, anticipate topics that might trigger his withdrawal, and adjust my behavior accordingly. I walked on eggshells in my own home, second-guessing every decision from what to wear to when to speak. This wasn't love, it was survival. 18 months into my marriage, Pinnacle Innovations received a series of threatening emails after announcing a controversial advertising campaign for a pharmaceutical client. Our CEO immediately hired enhanced security solutions to assess vulnerabilities and protect key executives. That's how Marcus Wilson entered my life, 6'2" with broad shoulders and observant brown eyes that missed nothing. He had the quiet confidence of someone who had faced real danger and wasn't easily intimidated. As lead consultant, he conducted individual meetings with executives to understand our routines and potential vulnerabilities. When Marcus arrived for our appointment, his handshake was firm and professional. He wasn't classically handsome like Ethan, but his face had character, a small scar above his right eyebrow, laugh lines around his eyes, and a thoughtful expression that made you feel truly seen. Mrs. Reynolds, he greeted me formally, using my married name. Please call me Brooke, I responded automatically. Marcus nodded and took a seat across from my desk. Brooke, then. I need to understand your daily patterns so we can identify any security concerns. His questions were thorough but respectful. He asked about my commute, regular appointments, social media usage, and whether I'd noticed any unusual behavior around me. When I mentioned Ethan's protective nature, something flickered in Marcus's expression. Protective how? He asked, his tone neutral. He likes to know where I am, who I'm with. Standard husband stuff, I said with a dismissive laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. Marcus didn't smile. There's a difference between concern and control. My job is to keep you safe while respecting your autonomy. That statement, so simple, so obvious, hit me like a revelation. When had anyone last prioritized my autonomy? Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a regular presence at the office. For high-risk executives like me, the security protocol included escort services for certain external meetings. Marcus often handled this personally, driving me to locations in his company sub and maintaining a professional distance that was somehow more respectful than anything I'd experienced in months. Ethan's reaction to Marcus was immediate and hostile. You didn't tell me you had a personal bodyguard, he said after seeing Marcus walk me to the door one evening. He's not my personal bodyguard. He's a security consultant hired by the company, I explained, keeping my tone light while inwardly bracing for Ethan's response. Why does he need to walk you to our door? That seems beyond professional requirements. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched Marcus's sub pull away. It's standard protocol after the threats. All executives have the same arrangement. Ethan's suspicion didn't dissipate. He began showing up unexpectedly at my office or calling multiple times when he knew I had external meetings. Each time Marcus witnessed these interactions, his expression remained neutral, but I noticed how carefully he observed Ethan's behavior and my reactions. During one drive back from a client meeting, Marcus broke his usual professional silence. Part of my job is recognizing patterns, he said, eyes on the road. In my previous work with domestic violence shelters, I learned that control often masquerades as concern. My breath caught. I'm not in a domestic violence situation. Marcus nodded slowly. Abuse isn't always physical. Sometimes it's psychological isolation. Manipulation, punishment, creating situations where someone feels they have no choice but to comply. Why are you telling me this? My voice came out sharper than intended. Because in my line of work, I've learned that safety is more than physical protection. It's also having the freedom to make your own choices without fear of consequences. We rode in silence for several minutes before he added, if you ever need resources or support. For any reason, my team maintains complete confidentiality. That conversation planted a seed. I began noticing patterns in my marriage that I'd previously rationalized or ignored. When Marcus accompanied me to a conference presentation and applauded my work without qualification, I realized how long it had been since I'd received genuine agenda-free praise. When he asked my opinion about security matters and implemented my suggestions, I remembered what it felt like to have my perspective valued. Marcus never overstepped professional boundaries or made inappropriate comments. His impact came from simple respect, something that had become so foreign in my life that its presence felt revolutionary. As weeks passed, Ethan's animosity toward Marcus intensified. He insisted on driving me to work whenever possible to reduce the need for security services. He questioned every interaction I had with Marcus, turning routine security briefings into potential infidelities in his mind. He's just doing his job, I said after Ethan questioned why Marcus had called to change a meeting time. There's nothing personal about it. I've seen how he looks at you, Ethan insisted, pacing our bedroom, and how you respond to him. You're different when he's around. More defiant. The truth was, Marcus's presence reminded me of who I used to be: confident, independent, unafraid to speak my mind. In his company, I temporarily escaped the walking on eggshells sensation that had become my constant state at home. That wasn't attraction, it was liberation. 2 months after enhanced security began working with Pinnacle, Marcus shared a personal story during a drive to a client meeting. My mother was in a controlling relationship for 8 years, he said without preamble. She made excuses for his behavior, blamed herself when he got angry. By the time she left, she didn't recognize herself anymore. I stared straight ahead, unwilling to meet his eyes. What made her finally leave? A friend gave her perspective, helped her see that what she was experiencing wasn't normal or deserved. Sometimes we can't recognize a situation when we're in the middle of it. Later that week, I reconnected with Caitlin for lunch, our first meeting in nearly 2 months. Her eyes widened when I entered the restaurant. "Brooke, you look different." I touched my face self-consciously. Different how? Tense, smaller somehow. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Are you really okay? And don't give me the Facebook version." Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully constructed facade. For the first time, I admitted aloud that my perfect marriage might not be so perfect after all. Our second anniversary arrived on a stormy October evening. I spent hours preparing, styling my hair into soft waves, applying makeup that enhanced without appearing too obvious. Ethan preferred a natural look, and squeezing into the cream-colored designer dress he had selected for the occasion. The dress was beautiful but uncomfortable, the fabric too tight across my ribs, the neckline higher than I would have chosen. Standing before the mirror, I barely recognized myself, not just because of the dress or makeup, but because the woman staring back at me looked perpetually apologetic, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes watchful for signs of disapproval. Ethan arrived home precisely at 7, greeting me with a quick kiss and a perfunctory compliment. "You look appropriate. The reservation is at 8. We should leave now to avoid traffic." In the car, I attempted light conversation about his day, but Ethan was distracted, checking his phone at stoplights. When my own phone chimed with a text from Caitlin wishing us a happy anniversary, Ethan's eyes darted to the screen. "Why is Caitlin texting you tonight? Did you tell her about our plans?" His tone carried an accusation. "She's my friend, she knows it's our anniversary." "So you've been discussing our private life with her? I thought we agreed to keep our relationship between us." "I didn't share any details, Ethan. She just wanted to wish us well." He fell into stony silence as rain began pattering against the windshield. By the time we reached La Bernardine, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, the skies had opened into a steady downpour. Ethan handed his keys to the valet without waiting to see if I made it under the awning without getting wet. The restaurant's interior was all subdued elegance, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and hushed conversations. The maitre d' led us to a prime table where a bottle of champagne already waited on ice. "Ethan's arrangement." "To 2 years," Ethan said, raising his glass after the sommelier poured, "and to your continued growth as my wife." I sipped the champagne, noting the possessive phrasing, not our growth together but my growth as his possession. The meal progressed with formal politeness. Ethan ordered for both of us without consultation, selecting dishes I typically enjoyed but removing my agency in even the small decision. He was on his 3rd glass of champagne when I decided to share my news. "The CMO is leaving Pinnacle," I said during a lull in conversation. "They're restructuring the marketing department, and my name is being considered for a senior leadership role." I expected congratulations or at least interest. Instead, Ethan's face hardened. "And when were you planning to discuss this with me?" "I'm discussing it now. I just found out yesterday." This would mean more responsibility, longer hours. He set down his fork with deliberate precision. "We've talked about starting a family soon. This seems like a step in the wrong direction." "We mentioned children as a possibility in the future, not as an immediate plan," I countered, emboldened by the champagne and the public setting. "This promotion would be significant for my career." "Your career?" Ethan's voice took on the dangerous softness I'd come to fear. "Always your career, never our family, our future." "They're not mutually exclusive, Ethan. Many women balance executive positions and motherhood successfully." "Not my wife," he said, voice rising slightly. "Not the mother of my children. We agreed that your career would take a back seat when we started a family." "I never agreed to that," I said, suddenly aware of nearby diners glancing our way. "I said we would make decisions together when the time came." Ethan drained his champagne glass and signaled for another bottle. This promotion discussion should have happened at home privately, not sprung on me during our anniversary dinner. "I thought you'd be proud of me," I said quietly. "Proud?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Of what? Your willingness to prioritize office politics over family planning? Your determination to compete with your husband's success?" Each word struck like a physical blow. I fought back tears, unwilling to create a scene in the restaurant. "That's not fair, Ethan. My career isn't a competition with yours. Everything is a competition, Brooke. I thought I'd taught you that by now. The sommelier arrived with the second bottle, but I covered my glass with my hand. None for me, thank you. Ethan's eyes narrowed at this small defiance. He became increasingly agitated as the meal progressed, ordering another bottle despite the first being barely touched, making pointed comments about career women just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. When the check arrived, Ethan examined it with exaggerated care before slapping down his platinum card. Quite expensive for such a disappointing evening, he announced loudly. The drive home was silent except for the pounding rain and occasional thunder. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, taking corners too quickly. I stared out the passenger window, mentally calculating how many days it would take to find an apartment if I left tonight. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. 15 minutes from home, Ethan suddenly swerved to the shoulder of the road and stopped the car. We were on a relatively deserted stretch of highway bordered by forest preserves, no businesses or residences in sight. "Get out," he said, his voice eerily calm. "What, Ethan, it's pouring rain. We're miles from home. I need you to make a choice right now, either your career or our marriage. If you take the promotion, we're done." Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his cold expression. I realized with sudden clarity that this wasn't about the promotion at all, it was about control. Every lesson had been building to this moment of complete submission. "I won't choose," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I deserve both a loving marriage and a fulfilling career. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't ask me to sacrifice either." Wrong answer. Ethan reached across me and pushed open my door. "Get out and think about your priorities. I'll come back when you're ready to be reasonable." "You can't be serious, it's storming and I don't even have my phone." I'd left it in my evening bag on the floor of the car. "Actions have consequences, Brooke. This is your lesson for tonight." His voice was devoid of emotion, as though explaining a simple concept to a child. When I didn't move, he added, "Get out, or I'll remove you myself." Something in his eyes told me he meant it. With shaking hands, I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out into the deluge. Instantly, my dress clung to my body, my carefully styled hair plastered to my face. "Ethan, please," I tried one last time, leaning toward the open door. He reached over and pulled it shut, then drove away without another word, tail lights disappearing into the rainy night. I stood frozen in disbelief, rain washing away my makeup and any remaining illusions about my marriage. Cars occasionally passed, but none stopped. A woman in an evening dress on the roadside apparently didn't register as an emergency to passing motorists. After 20 minutes of futile attempts to flag down help, my shivers had turned to violent trembling. My thin dress offered no protection against the October chill, and the rain showed no signs of letting up. I began walking in the direction of home, knowing it would take hours to reach but seeing no alternative. That's when headlights approached from behind, slowing as they neared. I stepped further onto the shoulder, wary of strangers on a night like this. The vehicle, a black SUV I immediately recognized, pulled alongside me and the passenger window lowered. Marcus's concerned face appeared. "Brooke, are you all right?" In that moment, seeing his familiar face, something broke inside me. Tears mixed with raindrops as I shook my head wordlessly. He quickly exited the vehicle, removing his jacket and placing it around my shoulders before guiding me to the passenger seat. The SUV's heater was blasting, the warmth almost painful against my chilled skin. "What happened?" he asked, handing me a bottle of water from the console. "Where's Ethan?" "He left me," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, "to teach me a lesson." Marcus's expression darkened, but his voice remained calm. "Are you hurt?" "Not physically." I pulled his jacket tighter around me. "How did you find me?" "Caitlin called me. She said you texted her about your anniversary dinner," then suddenly stopped responding. She was worried. I vaguely remembered sending Caitlin a quick update about the tension at dinner before Ethan had confiscated my phone, claiming I was being rude by texting during our meal. "She has your number?" I asked, confused. "We exchanged contact information after your lunch last week. She mentioned being concerned about some changes in your behavior." Under normal circumstances, I might have been angry about this behind-my-back connection. Instead, overwhelming gratitude washed over me. Someone had been paying attention. Someone had cared enough to act. As Marcus pulled back onto the road, thunder rumbled overhead like the closing of a door or perhaps the opening of one. Marcus drove in silence for several minutes, the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers and the hum of the heater the only sounds in the SUV. I stared straight ahead, my mind oddly blank after the emotional hurricane of the evening. "I'm not taking you home," Marcus finally said, his voice gentle but firm. I turned to look at him, noting the determined set of his jaw. Where are we going? Somewhere safe where you can get warm and think clearly. There's a 24-hour diner about 15 minutes from here, unless you'd prefer a hospital or police station. No police, I said quickly, then added, the diner is fine. Marcus nodded and continued driving, and noticed he checked his rearview mirror frequently, as though concerned we might be followed. The professional security consultant was fully engaged, his personal feelings, whatever they might be, carefully contained behind a mask of competence. The diner was a retro establishment with neon signs and red vinyl booths. At nearly 11 on a rainy Tuesday night, it was mostly empty. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Darlene, took one look at my bedraggled appearance and Marcus's protective stance and led us to a corner booth without questions. Coffee for both of you, and I'll bring some extra napkins, she said, her tone suggesting she'd seen her share of people in distress. Once she'd delivered 2 steaming mugs and a stack of napkins, then retreated to give us privacy, Marcus spoke. You don't have to tell me what happened if you're not ready, but I need to know if you feel safe returning home tonight. I wrapped my cold fingers around the warm mug, considering his question. Did I feel safe? The physical distance between the diner and my penthouse wasn't what concerned me, it was the psychological gulf that had finally become unbridgeable. No, I admitted, the word surprisingly easy to say aloud. I don't think I can go back there tonight. Marcus nodded as though my answer confirmed something he already suspected. You have options, Brooke. More than you might realize right now. Do I? I gave a hollow laugh. My husband just abandoned me on the side of the road. Everything I own is in his apartment. My name isn't even on the lease. Those are logistical problems, not insurmountable barriers, Marcus replied calmly. In my work, I've helped dozens of people navigate situations like yours. Situations like mine, I repeated slowly. You mean abusive relationships? Marcus met my gaze steadily. Control is a form of abuse. Isolation is a form of abuse. Using fear and punishment to modify someone's behavior is abuse. Hearing these words spoken aloud plainly without judgment broke something open inside me. Tears welled in my eyes again, but I blinked them back, determined to maintain composure in this public place. I never thought of myself as that type of person, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm educated, financially independent. I should have known better. There is no type of person who gets abused, Marcus said firmly. I've seen it happen to CEOs, doctors, lawyers, police officers. Strength in one area of life doesn't make anyone immune, and abusers are often experts at gradually normalizing behavior that would horrify you if it happened all at once. He reached into his pocket and removed a business card, sliding it across the table. It wasn't his regular security company card, but one for a domestic violence resource center. The director is a former colleague. They offer everything from emergency housing to legal advice to therapy, all confidential, all on your terms. I stared at the card without touching it, reality crashing down around me. This is really happening, isn't it? My marriage is over. That's your decision to make, Marcus said carefully, but tonight you need a safe place to stay and time to think without pressure. I nodded, finally picking up the card and tucking it into my still damp evening bag. Caitlin might let me stay with her. Can I borrow your phone? Mine is still in Ethan's car. Marcus handed me his phone without hesitation. Caitlin answered on the second ring, her voice frantic. Marcus, did you find her? Is Brooke okay? It's me, Kate, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I'm okay, but I need a place to stay tonight. Can I come over? Oh my God, Brooke, of course you can stay. What happened? No, don't tell me now, just come over. Do you need me to pick you up? No, Marcus is with me. We're at a diner now, but we can head to your place soon. Marcus is with you. Caitlin sounded relieved. Good, I've been so worried since you stopped responding to texts. Ethan called looking for you, but I didn't tell him I'd contacted Marcus. My stomach tightened at the mention of Ethan. What did you tell him? That I hadn't heard from you since earlier and suggested he check hospitals if he was concerned. He sounded off, Brooke, not worried exactly, more angry. I'll explain everything when I see you, I promised. And Kate, thank you for sending Marcus. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. After hanging up, I looked across the table at Marcus, who had been deliberately focusing on his coffee during my conversation. You'll drive me to Caitlin, yes? Of course, whenever you're ready. I nodded, then suddenly remembered something important. Won't Ethan go there looking for me? He knows Caitlin and I are friends. If you're concerned about that, I can arrange for a security detail tonight, Marcus offered, completely off the record, no connection to your company. The thought of Ethan's potential reaction to finding me made my chest tighten with anxiety. Would that be asking too much? Not at all, it's what I would recommend professionally in this situation. Marcus's tone remained neutral, but his eyes conveyed understanding. I'll make a few calls while you finish your coffee. As he stepped outside to arrange security, I sat alone in the booth staring at my distorted reflection in the diner window. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, hair wild from the rain, makeup smeared, eyes haunted, yet somehow she seemed more real than the perfectly coiffed corporate wife I'd become. For the first time in 2 years, I was making a decision Ethan couldn't control or punish. The realization was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. When Marcus returned, he didn't rush me. We sat in companionable silence until I was ready to leave, Marcus occasionally sharing stories about former clients who had successfully rebuilt their lives after leaving controlling relationships. One woman I worked with is now running her own security firm, he said as we prepared to depart. Another is a state senator. They all started exactly where you are tonight, making the decision to prioritize their safety and well-being. In the car on the way to Caitlin's downtown apartment, I finally asked the question that had been nagging at me: why are you doing all this? It's well beyond your professional obligations. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, but his expression softened slightly. I told you about my mother's situation. What I didn't mention is that when she finally left, it was because a coworker noticed the signs and helped her find resources. That coworker probably saved her life. He glanced at me briefly. Sometimes people need a bridge to get from where they are to where they deserve to be. At Caitlin's building, Marcus did a security sweep before escorting me upstairs. He confirmed that 2 of his most trusted team members would monitor the building overnight, and provided both Caitlin and me with direct contact information. Try to get some rest, he advised before leaving. Tomorrow will be challenging, but remember you don't have to face it alone. As I settled onto Caitlin's couch wrapped in borrowed pajamas and a thick blanket, the full weight of the evening's events finally hit me. My marriage was over. The carefully constructed life I'd been living had shattered, yet amid the grief and fear I felt something unexpected stirring in my chest, the first fragile tendrils of freedom taking root. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee brewing. For a blissful moment I forgot the previous night's events, then reality crashed back, bringing with it a wave of anxiety and an odd sense of resolve. Caitlin appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work but clearly planning to stay home. You're awake. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by an emotional freight train, I admitted, sitting up and accepting the coffee mug she offered, but also clearer somehow. My phone, or rather its absence, suddenly registered. I need to get a new phone today and close and figure out everything. One step at a time, Caitlin advised, sitting beside me. Marcus called this morning to check in. He said his team reported no sign of Ethan overnight. That wouldn't last, and knew Ethan too well. His initial anger would have transformed into calculated strategy by now. My temporary disappearance was an unacceptable challenge to his authority, one he wouldn't ignore. As if summoned by my thoughts, Caitlin's phone rang. She checked the screen and grimaced. It's him, 3rd time since 7 a.m. I need to deal with this eventually, I said, reaching for her phone. I might as well start now. Caitlin hesitated before handing it over. I'll give you privacy, but I'm just in the next room if you need me. I took a deep breath and answered, hello, Ethan. Finally, his voice was eerily calm. I've been trying to reach you all night. I was worried sick. The familiar manipulation tactic making his cruelty sound like concern no longer worked its magic. Were you? That's surprising, considering you left me stranded in a thunderstorm. I came back for you, Brooke. 20 minutes later, you were gone. His tone suggested I was the unreasonable one. What was I supposed to think when my wife disappeared on our anniversary? Perhaps that she found another way home after being abandoned on a deserted road, or that she didn't want to wait around to see if her husband would decide she'd been punished enough? Ethan's sigh conveyed exaggerated patience. You're being dramatic. I needed to make a point about your priorities, and clearly it worked. You've had time to think about your behavior. Now it's time to come home so we can move past this childish episode. No, the word came out stronger than I expected. Excuse me. I said no, Ethan, I'm not coming home, not today, maybe not ever. Silence stretched between us before he spoke again, his voice dropping to the dangerous softness I'd come to fear. This isn't a negotiation, Brooke. Either you come home today and we discuss this like adults, or there will be consequences. What consequences exactly? Will you leave me in another rainstorm, take away my credit cards, call my boss? I was surprised by my own boldness. I'm done being punished for existing as an independent person. Where are you getting these ridiculous ideas? His tone shifted to concerned husband. For any potential listeners, Is someone influencing you? Is it that security consultant? Caitlin, you know they've always been jealous of our relationship. The gaslighting attempt was so transparent it almost made me laugh. The only person influencing me is you, Ethan. 2 years of teaching me lessons has finally taught me one: this isn't love. You're confused and emotional, he said dismissively. We'll discuss this when you're thinking clearly. I expect you home by 6. We have dinner with the Robertsons at 8. I won't be there. I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking but my resolve strengthening. Within seconds, Caitlin's phone lit up with incoming texts from Ethan, alternating between threats and pleas. I silenced the device and set it aside. That sounded intense, Caitlin said, returning with more coffee. It's only beginning, I replied, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what lay ahead. I need a plan. By noon, that plan was taking shape. Marcus arrived with a new phone for me, company issued for security purposes, he explained, and connected me with Rachel Sullivan, a lawyer specializing in high-conflict divorces, while Marcus arranged for a security team to accompany me to the penthouse to collect essential items. I spoke with Rachel via conference call. Based on what you've described, we should file for an emergency temporary order regarding financial assets, Rachel advised. Men like your husband often attempt to restrict access to money as a control tactic. Everything's in joint accounts he monitors, I explain, and I'm not on the lease for our apartment. Your income has contributed to those joint accounts, correct? And you've lived in the residence for over a year as your primary home? We have legal grounds to protect your interests. Rachel's confidence was reassuring. I can have paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, document everything: the incident last night, any threatening communications, previous controlling behaviors. By 3 o'clock, I was prepared to retrieve my belongings. Marcus's team included 2 female security specialists who would help me pack efficiently while he and another colleague managed perimeter security. Caitlin would remain at her apartment with 1 security team member. As a precaution, Ethan will likely be at his office, I told the team as we drove to the penthouse, but he sometimes comes home mid-afternoon if he has evening events. We've accounted for that possibility, Marcus assured me. If he arrives, we'll handle it professionally. Our goal is to get you in and out without confrontation. The penthouse felt simultaneously familiar and foreign as we entered. Just yesterday morning, I'd left for work from this space, never imagining I wouldn't return as Ethan's wife. Now, accompanied by virtual strangers, I was preparing to extract myself from the life we've built. The female security specialists, Alexandra and Taylor, were remarkably efficient. They helped me identify priority items, important documents, irreplaceable personal belongings, clothing, and essentials for at least 2 weeks. We worked methodically through each room, careful not to take anything that could be contested as jointly owned. In our bedroom closet, I found myself hesitating over designer dresses Ethan had selected for me, beautiful, expensive garments that had never felt like mine. Taylor noticed my hesitation. Anything you regularly wore that was specifically gifted to you is legally yours, she advised. We can document everything we take with photos if you're concerned. I left the dresses and took only clothes I had chosen myself or truly loved. In my home office, I gathered professional certificates, personal journals, and backed up work projects. From our shared safe, I retrieved my birth certificate, passport, and grandmother's jewelry. We had been working for nearly an hour when the security communication devices crackled to life. Subject approaching main entrance, came the alert from the team member monitoring the lobby. At 2 minutes. Marcus appeared in the doorway. We need to finish up. Are you ready? I glanced around the half-packed bedroom. Not entirely, but I have the essentials. Your safety is the priority, he reminded me. We can arrange for the rest later with proper legal representation present. We were consolidating bags in the foyer when the elevator doors opened, revealing Ethan. He froze momentarily, taking in the scene, me surrounded by security personnel, luggage at my feet, before his face transformed into the charming mask he wore for public consumption. Brooke, darling, what's all this? His tone was light, but his eyes were cold as they moved from me to Marcus. I'm gathering some personal belongings, Ethan, I said, proud that my voice remained steady. With an armed escort? That seems excessive for a minor disagreement. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he addressed Marcus. I believe your services are no longer required here, Mr. Wilson. This is between my wife and me. Marcus maintained professional composure. We're providing security services at Mrs. Reynolds' request. We'll be leaving shortly. Will you? Ethan stepped closer, invading my personal space in a move calculated to intimidate while appearing outwardly affectionate. Brooke, this theatrical display is unnecessary. Send these people away so we can talk privately. No, I said firmly, stepping back. I'm leaving, Ethan. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow regarding next steps. His facade slipped momentarily, rage flashing across his features before he regained control. Lawyer, you're overreacting to a minor marital spat. Is this because of the promotion? Take it if it means that much to you. I'm willing to compromise. The offer presented as a generous concession might have worked yesterday. Today, I recognized it as the manipulation tactic it was. This isn't about the promotion, I replied. It's about 2 years of control, isolation, and emotional abuse disguised as teaching me lessons. I'm done, Ethan. His expression hardened. You've been filling her head with this abuse narrative, he accused Marcus. I could sue you in your company for alienation of affection. This is Mrs. Reynolds' decision, Marcus replied evenly. We're simply providing security services. Ethan changed tactics, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur meant for my ears alone. Think about what you're doing, Brooke. Your career, your reputation. I made you who you are. One call to the pinnacle board from me, and your precious promotion disappears. Is this security consultant worth throwing away everything we've built? The threat was exactly what I'd expected, yet hearing it verbalized still stung. Before I could respond, Marcus spoke. Mr. Reynolds, I should inform you that this conversation is being recorded as part of our security protocol. Threats against Mrs. Reynolds' employment could be considered blackmail and harassment. Ethan's face contorted with barely suppressed fury. He stepped back, straightening his tie in a gesture I recognized as his attempt to regain control. Take whatever you think is yours, he said coldly, but understand that actions have consequences, Brooke. You've made your choice. Yes, I agreed, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time in our relationship. I have. As we left with my belongings, Ethan remained in the foyer, watching with calculated stillness. In the elevator, I released a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You did well, Marcus said quietly. That type of confrontation is never easy. It's only the beginning, I replied, understanding that Ethan wouldn't surrender control without a fight. The next weeks confirmed this prediction. Ethan's tactics ranged from freezing joint accounts quickly addressed by court orders to contacting my boss with vague allegations of professional impropriety immediately dismissed thanks to my solid reputation and the company's awareness of the domestic situation. I moved into a temporary furnished apartment with enhanced security features, selected by Marcus's team and leased through a confidential arrangement. The divorce proceedings began with Ethan initially refusing mediation and demanding contested hearings. Rachel, my attorney, proved worth every penny of her considerable fees. She anticipated Ethan's maneuvers before he made them, countering his attempts to drag out proceedings or hide assets. When he claimed ownership of my grandmother's jewelry as gifts he'd given me, she produced photographs of me wearing the pieces before our marriage. Men like Ethan rely on intimidation and exhaustion, Rachel explained during one particularly difficult week. They want to wear you down until giving in seems easier than fighting. Our job is to remain calm and persistent. Throughout this period, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed during my marriage. I reconnected with college friends Ethan had deemed inappropriate influences. I called my parents for a long overdue honest conversation about my marriage and its dissolution. We sensed something was wrong, my mother admitted, her voice thick with tears. But every time we expressed concern, you became more distant. We were afraid of pushing you away completely. It wasn't your fault, I assured her. Isolation is part of the pattern. I couldn't see it myself until I was almost drowning in it. Work became a sanctuary rather than another battlefield. With Ethan's influence removed, I accepted the promotion to senior leadership with confidence rather than guilt. My team responded to my more authentic leadership style with increased productivity and loyalty. Caitlin remained my steadfast support, offering her couch on difficult nights and celebrating small victories in the legal process. Marcus maintained professional boundaries while ensuring my security arrangements remained effective, checking in regularly but never overstepping into personal territory. 3 months after leaving the penthouse, I signed the lease on my own apartment, a modern one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. It wasn't as luxurious as Ethan's penthouse, but every piece of furniture, every decorative choice, reflected my preferences rather than his. The day I moved in, Marcus conducted a final security assessment, installing additional locks and a state-of-the-art security system. Is all this really necessary still? Asked as he demonstrated the features. Ethan seems to have accepted the divorce now that the financial settlement is nearly finalized. Marcus regarded me seriously. Most security incidents occur during periods of transition or perceived victory. I'd rather you have protection you don't need than need protection you don't have. His caution proved prescient when Ethan made one final attempt at control, appearing at my office unannounced with an offer to reconcile with no conditions. When I refused, he revealed his true intentions. He'd been recording our conversations in hopes of gathering evidence that I'd been manipulated by Marcus or others. "I have nothing to hide, Ethan," I told him calmly as security escorted him from the building. "The only manipulation in our relationship came from you." That evening, alone in my new apartment, I realized I'd spoken my truth without fear for the first time in years. The woman who had stood trembling in the rain, waiting for permission to exist, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, and unwilling to surrender her autonomy ever again. 6 months after that rainy night that changed everything, I stood in my apartment watching another storm roll across the Chicago skyline. Unlike that night, this rain didn't feel threatening or symbolic of loss. It was simply weather, cleansing and natural. The divorce proceedings had dragged on longer than necessary due to Ethan's tactics. He contested everything possible, from ownership of kitchen appliances to vacation photos. His attorney requested continuances, filed redundant motions, and employed every delay tactic available. Rachel recognized the strategy immediately. "He's trying to maintain connection and control through the legal system," she explained during one particularly frustrating week. "Each delay forces you to remain engaged with him, to continue reacting to his moves." Understanding his motivation helped me detach emotionally from the process. I began viewing court filings and negotiations as business transactions rather than personal attacks. When Ethan finally realized his tactics weren't producing the desired emotional response, he abruptly changed course, agreeing to reasonable settlement terms. "He's saving face," Rachel noted when the settlement offer arrived, presenting himself as the reasonable party who just wants this resolved. Classic abuser pivot when control tactics fail. The day the final divorce papers were signed, I expected to feel triumphant or at least profoundly relieved. Instead, I experienced a quiet sense of closure, the simple rightness of ending something that should never have continued as long as it did. Therapy had become an essential part of my healing journey. Dr. Bennett, a psychologist specializing in recovery from controlling relationships, helped me recognize patterns I hadn't been conscious of during my marriage. "You didn't fail," she reminded me during an early session when I expressed shame about not recognizing the abuse sooner. "You were responding normally to abnormal treatment. The human brain is wired to adapt to gradually escalating situations. It's how we survive." Through therapy, I began understanding how my relationship with Ethan had evolved from romantic to restrictive, identified early warning signs I'd missed, or rationalized his excessive need to know my whereabouts, the subtle criticisms disguised as helpful suggestions, the tests designed to prove my loyalty. "In future relationships, you'll recognize these patterns immediately," Dr. Bennett assured me. "Your internal alarm system has been recalibrated." The thought of future relationships had seemed impossible in those early months after leaving. The idea of trusting another person with my heart or vulnerability felt like contemplating a second trip into a burning building. Gradually, however, I began reconnecting with my capacity for healthy connection. It started with rebuilding friendships. Caitlin had remained steadfast throughout, but other relationships required conscious restoration. I reached out to college friends Ethan had deemed bad influences, reconnecting over coffee dates and honest conversations about my absence from their lives. "We knew something was off," my friend Rachel admitted during our first reunion. "You stopped being you, laughing less, constantly checking your phone when we did see you, making excuses for canceling plans." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. "We tried early on. You defended him so adamantly that we worried pushing harder would only isolate you more. It's the impossible dilemma when watching someone you care about in a controlling relationship." These reconciliations weren't always easy. Some friends had moved on, unwilling to reinvest in a connection that had been severed. I accepted these losses as natural consequences of the choices I'd made under Ethan's influence. Work continued to provide structure and purpose during this period of rebuilding. My promotion to marketing director came with increased responsibility and a team of 14 reporting directly to me. Unlike Ethan, who used his authority to control and diminish others, I was determined to lead with transparency and genuine respect for my colleagues' contribution. This approach paid dividends beyond my professional life. Team members became friends, occasionally joining me for after-work dinners or weekend brunches. These casual connections helped repair my damaged trust in everyday human interaction. 5 months after leaving Ethan, I received an unexpected call from Marcus. We had maintained minimal contact since the security systems were installed in my new apartment, his professionalism never wavering into personal territory despite the intimate circumstances of our initial connection. "I'm following up on the restraining order expiration," he explained, his voice carrying the neutral tone he always maintained in our interactions. "Do you want to discuss renewal options?" The temporary restraining order against Ethan had been part of the divorce settlement after his unannounced office visit. He had adhered to its terms, maintaining the required distance and ceasing direct communication. "I don't think renewal is necessary," I replied after consideration. "He seems to have moved on." Social media indicated Ethan was dating someone new, a young financial analyst from his company. I felt a momentary concern for her, followed by the recognition that her journey wasn't my responsibility. "That's your decision," Marcus said, "but if anything changes day or night, you still have the direct line to our security team." "Thank you, not just for the security services, but for everything that night. I never properly expressed how much it meant that you showed up." A brief silence followed before Marcus responded, his professional tone softening slightly. "I've been meaning to tell you something about that night. Caitlin called me because she was worried, but I was already looking for you." "You were? Why?" "After our conversation about controlling relationships, I recognized signs of escalation in Ethan's behavior at your office. I was concerned enough to drive by the restaurant where you mentioned having your anniversary dinner. When you weren't there, I started searching likely routes between the restaurant and your home. Finding you on that road wasn't entirely coincidence." The revelation stunned me, not just the fact that he'd been actively searching, but that he'd been observant enough to recognize danger signals I'd normalized. "Would you consider having coffee sometime?" I asked impulsively, not as a client or security concern, just as people. Another pause, longer this time. "I'd like that, but I want to be clear about something first. My mother's experience with domestic abuse isn't my only personal connection to this issue. I grew up watching her relationship deteriorate, seeing the impact of control and emotional manipulation firsthand. It shaped how I view relationships and why I eventually went into security work." His honesty created space for a different kind of conversation, one between equals with shared understanding rather than rescuer and victim. We met the following weekend at a small cafe far from my usual haunts, talking for hours about everything from childhood experiences to favorite books to our perspectives on healing from trauma. Marcus was different outside his professional role, more animated, occasionally funny, deeply thoughtful. Our coffee extended to lunch, then an afternoon walk along the lakefront. By unspoken agreement, we didn't discuss Ethan or the specifics of my marriage, focusing instead on present interests and future possibilities. "Would it be inappropriate to do this again?" he asked as we prepared to part. "I don't think so," I replied thoughtfully. "I'm not your client anymore, and I'm not looking for another rescuer. I've learned to save myself." "Good," Marcus said simply, "because I'm not interested in rescuing anyone. I'm interested in knowing Brooke." That first meeting evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and authentic communication, the antithesis of what I'd experienced with Ethan. We proceeded cautiously, both aware of the complex circumstances of our initial connection, neither rushing toward romantic involvement despite growing attraction. Meanwhile, my healing journey continued in unexpected directions. Inspired by conversations with other women in my therapy group, I established an informal support network for professional women navigating controlling relationships. What began as occasional coffee meetings grew into a structured monthly gathering with guest speakers and resource sharing. "You've turned your experience into something meaningful for others," Dr. Bennett observed during one of our sessions. "That's a powerful component of healing." The holiday season, my first since the divorce, presented new challenges and opportunities. Rather than dreading the family gatherings and social events that had been minefields during my marriage, I created new traditions that honored my reclaimed independence. I hosted a small Thanksgiving dinner for friends who, like me, were rebuilding their lives. I spent Christmas with my parents, enjoying their company without Ethan's critical presence casting a shadow over every interaction. On New Year's Eve, 7 months after leaving my marriage, I declined multiple party invitations in favor of a quiet evening alone in my apartment. As midnight approached, I opened the windows despite the winter chill, listening to the distant sounds of celebration across the city. When my phone chimed with a text from Marcus, "Happy New Year," grateful our paths crossed, I smiled without the anxiety that would have accompanied an unexpected message during my marriage. Progress, I realized, came in these small moments of ordinary joy uncomplicated by fear. Standing at the window watching fireworks illuminate the Chicago skyline, I reflected on the journey from that rainy night to this moment of peaceful solitude. The woman abandoned on a deserted road had discovered her own strength, reclaimed her voice, and built a life defined by choice rather than coercion. The rain that night hadn't been an ending but a beginning, washing away illusions to reveal the resilient self that had been there all along, waiting to emerge. If you're watching this and recognize your own relationship in my story, please know that the red flags I ignored were warning signs, not normal relationship challenges. Control is not love, isolation is not protection, punishment is not guidance. You deserve to exist fully as yourself, without fear of consequences for your independence. The journey to freedom isn't easy, but it's worth every difficult step. Whether you're considering leaving, have recently left, or are years into recovery from a controlling relationship, I hope my story reminds you that transformation is always possible. The strongest people I know are those who have rebuilt themselves after being torn down. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience and recovery. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment about your own journey or insights. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to take their first step toward freedom. Remember, the rain that feels like it's drowning you today might actually be washing you clean for tomorrow's new beginning.